October 14th, 2023. Location, London, the square in front of Buckingham Palace. It all started as a normal day for the Royal Guard. Thousands of tourists flooded the square in front of the palace, taking selfies in front of the impeccably trained guards. But no one suspected that in a few minutes an event would take place that would make even the most experienced guards of His Majesty hold their breath. A man in a dirty hooded sweatshirt stood out among the crowd. He was chewing on a sandwich and, laughing, approached one of the guardsmen, Sergeant Alex Mackenzie. The tourist started a gross provocation, waving his arms in the soldier's face, pushing him with his shoulder, laughing loudly. But the worst happened in a few seconds. He brazenly sneezed right into the guardsman's face. The crowd froze. The guards rushed to the offender, but someone stepped forward to stop the outrage. It was Keanu Reeves, a famous actor who was in London. What happened next looked like a scene from a movie. But it was real, and it almost cost him his life. The weather in London was classically autumnal, cool air, low clouds, and occasional glimpses of the sun sliding across the golden spires of Buckingham Palace. A crowd of tourists crowded along the metal fence, watching the stiff-necked guardsmen in their red uniforms and tall bear hats. Sergeant Alex Mackenzie had been at his post for over an hour. A veteran of the Royal Regiment, 2 missions in Afghanistan, perfect discipline, his face was carved like a marble statue, without a hint of emotion. He could see everything, the crowd, the movements of tourists, even the slightest change in people's behavior, even though he couldn't look back. And among this crowd was he, the brazen tourist, Gavin Holman, 32 years old, a U.S. citizen. He had been drinking with friends in a pub in Westminster since early morning, boasting that he had come to London for adventure. He was tall, with unkempt stubble, a dirty sweatshirt, and a leather shoulder bag. On his chest was an inscription, "British traditions are a joke." Look at this guy. He waved his hand in Mackenzie's direction, addressing his friends. What a job, standing here like a scarecrow. His friends, 2 men and a woman, laughed. Someone in the crowd gave him a judgmental look, but Gavin didn't care. His next prank was even worse. He walked up to the guardsman and leaned down sharply to his face. "Hey, buddy, how about if I do this?" Gavin waved his hand a few centimeters from Mackenzie's eyes. The soldier did not move. This was not enough for Gavin. He took another step, pretending to hug the soldier. Whispers began in the crowd. Some people took out their phones. They were waiting for a reaction. But Mackenzie was flawless. He didn't move from his spot. And then something happened that shocked everyone. Gavin took in a breath, blew his nose loudly, and sneezed right into the guardsman's face. The crowd froze. Time seemed to stand still. Drops of saliva and mucus glistened on Mackenzie's face. Some of the tourists even screamed. Gavin laughed out loud. "Oh, sorry, man. It's just the fall virus. You don't mind, do you?" He wiped his nose on his sleeve and pretended to do it again. And then someone from the crowd stepped forward. A tall man in a black coat, sunglasses, and a focused expression. He was world famous. Keanu Reeves. And the next few seconds changed everything. Gavin was still laughing, wiping his snot on his sleeve, when he heard someone's low but calm voice behind him. "That's too much. Move away." Gavin turned around and saw Keanu Reeves. The crowd cheered. Cameras and phones instantly turned toward the Hollywood star. He was standing up straight, his arms calmly lowered, but there was a tension in his posture, as if he was preparing for a possible blow. "Wow, it's John Wick." Gavin laughed, looking back at his friends. "What are you going to do? Are you going to shoot me in the leg?" Keanu did not respond to the provocation. "You just brazenly insulted a man who is standing here doing his duty. This is not just a tourist show. This is a tradition that is bigger than you." Gavin snorted and turned back to Mackenzie. "Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. I didn't realize you had a whole fan section here. Or maybe you're his bodyguard." Keanu took another step forward. "You wouldn't want that to happen to you." "Seriously?" Gavin raised his eyebrows. "Do you realize that this is just a show? These guys are here for our entertainment." This time, Mackenzie finally moved. His movement was so sharp and polished that it seemed as if he was just waiting for a signal. He clearly turned 45 degrees, took half a step forward, and put the rifle in front of him, banging the butt against the pavement. "Get back." His voice was cold and uncompromising. The crowd gasped. Gavin jumped in surprise, but quickly regained his cocky expression. "Well, so that's how it works. You just need a little push, and you start moving? Let's do it again." He took another step forward, but Keanu Reeves suddenly raised his hand and stopped him by placing his palm on his chest. That's enough. Gavin froze. He hadn't expected physical contact. Someone in the crowd held their breath. Did you just push me? Gavin looked at him suspiciously. I stopped you, Keanu replied calmly. But Gavin was already flushing with anger. Okay, Mr. Hollywood, you just made a big mistake. And before anyone could react, Gavin swung and hit Keanu sharply in the chest. The actor staggered backwards but stood up. The crowd erupted in cheers. Someone screamed. People began to scatter to the sides. And then two things happened at the same time. Mackenzie, acting according to military protocol, instantly raised his rifle and pointed it at Gavin. The palace guards, who were still keeping in the shadows, rushed forward. But Gavin was not going to stop. He rushed at Keanu, waving his arms like an angry bull. The next few seconds changed everything. Gavin rushed forward, his fist flying straight into Keanu Reeves' face. But he didn't have time. Keanu dodged it. The movement was smooth, almost invisible, like in an action movie, only this time it wasn't a movie. In an instant, the actor turned around, dodging the blow, and stepped back half a step, holding his hands open, showing that he didn't want to fight. But this only made Gavin angry. He swung again. And suddenly there was a loud sound of an iron blow. Gavin stopped as if the power had been cut off. The cold iron of Sergeant Mackenzie's rifle was now resting on his chest. Get down on the ground. The guardsman's voice was calm, but there was a force in it that could not be ignored. Gavin was dumbfounded. His heart was pounding in his chest and sweat was beading on his forehead. What the? He looked down. The rifle and bayonet were now in the ready position. On the ground, Mackenzie repeated, his voice even firmer this time. Keanu Reeves did not move. His eyes remained fixed on Gavin, but he did not smile, did not react sarcastically. This was not a scene from a movie, not a Hollywood production. This was reality. And Gavin realized he had made a big mistake. Okay. He raised his hands. The palace guards who had been approaching were now close by. Two men in dark suits grabbed his hands and quickly snapped them behind his back. You are under arrest for assault and disturbing public order, one of the guards said without any emotion, as if it were a routine procedure. What? Why? I was just... Gavin shook his head, looking at the crowd. But the crowd was silent. Everyone had seen what had happened. You asked for it, buddy, Keanu said calmly. Gavin was dragged back across the square. His friends did not dare to intervene. Only now did the sounds of the crowd begin to come through. Whispers, indignant shouts, applause. People could not believe that they had witnessed such a spectacle. Keanu turned to Mackenzie. Is everything okay? The guardsman did not move. He stood as he should have, ignoring even the fact that he still had the marks of a dirty sneeze on his face. But his eyes barely met the actors, and something more than just gratitude flashed in them. He could not say thank you. But Keanu understood without words. But it wasn't over yet, because a second later, the crowd gasped again. Gavin, who had almost been dragged behind the fence, jerked, broke free of the guard's grasp, and ran back, straight for Keanu. And this time it could have ended much worse. It all happened in a split second. Gavin broke free of the guards, his face contorted with rage. He ran straight for Keanu, clutching a pocket knife. The crowd screamed again. The guards couldn't catch up, they were too far away, and Gavin was running. Keanu, although he saw the movement, had no time to dodge. And then something incredible happened. At the last moment before the impact, Mackenzie's rifle moved again. All the people heard was a sharp metallic sound as the rifle's heavy but hit Gavin in the chest. The impact was incredibly strong. Gavin flew back like a rag doll, hit the pavement, and remained lying there, breathing heavily. The knife fell from his hand and clattered on the stones. There was a second of absolute silence. Even the tourists, who were still filming everything, were stunned. Keanu slowly turned his head. Mackenzie was standing in front of him, impeccable posture, cold gaze. The guardsman held his rifle as if nothing had happened. But now everyone realized that he had been in control of the situation from the beginning. Gavin coughed, trying to get up, but the guards immediately grabbed him. This is an assault with a weapon, one of them said, twisting his arms back. Gavin was no longer screaming or laughing. He was just breathing heavily, not understanding how everything had changed so quickly. Keanu finally took a step toward Mackenzie. Impressive. The sergeant didn't say anything. He simply stood in the starting position as required by protocol. The scene looked like a movie, but it was reality. Gavin was finally dragged away. The crowd started to applaud. But Mackenzie did not react. He just stood there. Keanu looked at him for a few more seconds, then nodded and stepped aside. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. But it was not the end of the story, because Mackenzie still hadn't wiped his face. And Keanu decided to change that. Gavin finally disappeared behind the fence and was broken down and led away by the guards. The crowd cheered for a long time, many watching the videos, not believing they had just seen it with their own eyes. But Mackenzie stood motionless. His face was still covered in dirt, spit, and sneeze drops from the same tourist who was now lying face down on the pavement. And then Keanu did what everyone remembered. He took off his black scarf. Slowly, almost respectfully, he approached Mackenzie and stopped in front of him. "May I?" he said quietly. No one knew how the guard would react. But then Mackenzie nodded slightly. Barely noticeable, almost inarticulate. But it was enough. Keanu carefully, slowly, without any haste, wiped his face with a black scarf. The crowd froze. Mackenzie did not move, did not speak, did not react. But everyone standing there realized that something much more than simple respect had just happened. It was a moment that could not be faked. A moment that transcended protocols, statuses, even the rules of the Royal Guard. When Keanu was done, he slowly folded the scarf and tucked it into his pocket. His eyes met Mackenzie's. "Thank you for your service." The guard did not answer again. But Keanu saw it in his eyes. It was not just gratitude. It was understanding. Epilogue: the next day. All the world's media exploded with headlines. Newspaper: Keanu Reeves defended the Royal Guardsman. And you have to see it. Newspaper: the greatest moment of respect in the history of London. Newspaper: the Royal Guard. Iron discipline in action. The video from the scene garnered hundreds of millions of views in a matter of hours. People could not believe that it really happened. Gavin received a real court sentence, a fine, a ban on entering the UK, and community service at a veterans center. But that was not the most important thing. The next morning, when the new guard replaced the previous guard, a black scarf was left outside Buckingham Palace. And on it was a note: discipline is more than just rules. It is in the soul. Mackenzie, having received permission, took the scarf. He looked at it for a long time, and then carefully folded it and put it in his uniform pocket. And then he stood at his post again, because that was exactly why he was standing there.